It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay. Welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, investigator Ed Opperman. So I just want to start this show off by telling you that I've never been so tired, both physically and emotionally exhausted than I am right now doing this show to you tonight. I just got off the plane from Washington, D.C. at about 6:45. Okay? And, I raced home, played one of the repeats we were going to play this week, and then I'm going to try and do this live show for you, because we were on live on 8/23 at 8:18 p.m. Normally we do this show at 7 p.m. So I grabbed some sushi and juiced up a couple of potatoes. Okay. And I got my show ready for you here. So the show is brought to you by the support of our sponsors, and I just want to say too that I raced home to do this show. Even after, when you hear about the details of my trip and my flying and stuff like that, it's just the week has been beyond exhausting. But I enjoy doing the show. I enjoy talking to the audience. I enjoy talking to the listeners, and I enjoy the feedback that I get from you. It's not just, a lot of people might think, well, it's just a catharsis, to talk things out, get things off your chest. And that's true, but it's also, too, the feedback you get from the listeners, the people that have been with me for years and years, that love the show and love my family and love the work. And we are a family. We really are. I have listeners that I love like my own family, that I help when they're in trouble. And the same goes in return. They help me out too when I'm in trouble. And I do appreciate all that. So the show is brought to you by the support of our sponsors, like CartKing.com. 877-986-7771. CartKing.com has been with us for years. They helped us out when we were in big trouble, and the show was about to go off the air. And then they sponsored us for a year and got the show. I got my daughter into college, and also got us on KCAA 540 AM and FM radio in California. They've been in business for 20 years, building carts and kiosks for any application, indoor and outdoor. So you go to the website, cart-king.com, and check out the different styles and models and stuff like that. See which design applies to your business. They'll custom design it for you, custom build it, then they'll ship it worldwide. And then also, too, give me a call, and I'll hook you up. I'll plug your new business on your new cart there, or your new kiosk, and I'll give you a lifetime free membership at OppermanReport.com. 877-986-7771. Got an email this week about the Pure Soap Flake Company. Good morning, Ed. Pure Soap Flakes are the real deal, Ed. My wife's hands were all cracked and dried up from the hand soap and dish soap we've been using. She couldn't find a soap that worked for her. Until now. Her hands are healing up and look better than ever. Plus, Pure Soap Flakes is awesome at getting stuff clean. It really is. Everything this guy is saying is true. I hardly have to scrub a dirty pan to get the stuff off. It's so true. Anyway, Ed, thanks for all you do. We appreciate it. And then he sends these kind words, sending prayers your way as well during this time of transition for you and Victoria. May the Holy Spirit strengthen you, my brother. Thank you so much there. I won't mention his name. Then we got a word back from, I sent it over to Christine, the head flake over there, Pure Soap Flake Company, and she says, how great is that? Thanks for sharing, Ed. You are so great. We say our Pure Soap products are designed by God, inspired by nature, and crafted in northern Minnesota. And she goes on to discuss it because she wants to do an ad campaign where we have recipes that include the soap. Good old Christine from PureSoapFlakes.com, a real sweetheart. And all my sponsors are cool people, We got a good team here. Then emailrevealer.com, that's my business. You can go there and adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, email tracing, asset searches. Get an autographed copy of my book, emailrevealer.com, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. Yeah, you go to emailrevealer.com. I got a couple of new sponsors, too, that I have to write up some ad copies so I can read it for them in the beginning. So, I just got back, like I said, from Washington, D.C. Before we left, I was all hot and heavy in the midst of the Jeffrey Epstein reporting going on all over the world now, right? Remember when it was just me? Okay, but now everybody's reporting on it. So I was contacted by NPR and by Channel 4 and BBC there, and all these people are talking to me about different information and stuff like that. And I've been trying to hook them up with Dan O'Hanks, who was the original investigator in all this. He's the one who has his original case file that's for sale. And he's the one who located Virginia Roberts to begin with. He read the police reports and stuff like that. And he found all the flight logs and the address book and all that stuff like that. This is the guy, and he sent me his case file. Since then, since it's become so popular and there's so much interest, he's been selling his case file. He wants to sell it to media and journalists and stuff like that. And I'm going to help him sell it too. So if you want to get a copy of this case file, you can't buy it from me because he was given to me as a gift for my own personal use. It wasn't given to me for resale. So, and I'm going to honor that, even though Dan O'Hanks hasn't stipulated that. But, I like the guy. I respect his work. There's not a lot of guys I can sit down and talk to like an old-timey expert, to sit back and hold court with me and school me, I don't get that a lot. So I appreciate it when I do, and I take that, I respect it and I absorb it. That's the kind of guy I am at Opperman. So anyway, before I left, we were hot and heavy and all that stuff like that. And, by the way, it's interesting. Still, I've been contacted by everybody, all these different people contact me. The Sun, the UK Mail. You know who hasn't contacted me? The Miami Herald. Not once. Ask, Ed, what do you know? Not once. Isn't that interesting? Doesn't that make you stop and think? Makes me stop and think. I had a lot of time to think. You know who else hasn't contacted me? None of these alt media researchers, these YouTubers and all these characters, none of these guys have contacted me and says, "Hey, Ed, this is so exciting. What do you know?" A couple have, there was those guys, the Nothing Exempt podcast, and of course, P.S. Redman, we talk all the time, William Ramsey. William Ramsey was aware of my involvement in this a long time ago. But, all these guys out there, the great Cernovich, the mighty Cernovich, why doesn't he, hey, what do you know, Ed? Isn't that interesting? Don't you wonder? I got no problem. I've been talking off the record to people all week, past couple of weeks, hours, man, getting free time. Hours of my time for free, And for some reason, all these YouTubers and these experts and all these guys, these wisdoms, these hotshots, these alt media characters, not one has thought fit to look into this and come to the source. Everyone else is. Isn't that interesting? And like I told you, last week I did a whole thing on this, or maybe it was the week before, who the hell knows anymore. My time has been a giant blur. You have no idea. But I said to you how, these reporters coming to me and stuff like that, and they don't have a clue about what's up here. And it's just ripe to be infiltrated and manipulated. And it is. Even some things I see out there have been reported, I can tell how it comes about, But we'll be working on that more in depth in the weeks to come. I'm going to be doing a whole analysis of a photo of Jeffrey Epstein's toe to compare it with the toe of the dead body of the toe tag. I'm going to do some forensic work there because that's what I am. I'm an investigator. All these guys, they want to go on and I'm an investigator, right? And that pisses me off so much. Has anybody ever hired you to investigate a damn thing in your life? No. But I appointed myself an investigator and I'm off to the races. I'm a researcher. Well, has anybody ever hired you to research a damn thing in your life? No, Ed, but, I appointed myself a researcher. Well, if you're such a researcher, you're such an investigator, I'm offering it. You can buy the case file. A real investigator, a guy I respect, guy did a lot of work in his life, did a lot of results here, and he's offering to sell you the case file. You can report on that in real life, in reality, so the stuff that's not you don't see on YouTube and catch it like that. But and that's your opportunity. You can do that if you want. You don't have to if you don't want to. No one's forcing you. Just do what you want there. So, like I said, I was talking to all these guys this week, and then the last minute we got a phone call. You see, because these plane tickets we had to get out to Washington, D.C. there to drop my daughter off at college, start her new life. They were buddy passes. I had done a job for a guy who worked for the airlines, and he hooked me up with these buddy passes, and he called me up at the last minute, the night before we were supposed to leave, and he says, hey, these are better options. You should leave tonight. So we scrambled, we threw the stuff together, we left the night before, and it turned out we were just, in the airport, like over 24 hours, trying to get on these flights. Because, with two people flying on standby, it's much more difficult than just one. Okay, what is that? Anyway. So, we got there over 24 hours later. We left Nevada at 9 o'clock at night. And finally got to our motel room. Because we went to the wrong motel. How's that? Okay? For a couple of jokers. Tired, hungry, living in airports. After midnight the next day. It's over 24 hours of traveling. And then, all that stuff you got to do, driving around, picking up stuff at the dorm room. The shock of seeing that tiny little dorm room, But I got to tell you this, man, we saw that college, American University, down there in Washington, D.C. It's right across the street from the Department of Homeland Security. And it is so impressive. It is so impressive, man. And it's right around the corner from the Japanese embassy and the German embassy and this art center across the street. What an opportunity, man, for this little girl. Not a little girl anymore. She's a woman. I couldn't be more proud. You can't imagine how proud I am and how confident I am that she's going to do well here. As the audience knows, we're very close. Me and my daughter are very close. When she was little, I worked from home, and all her friends would come play in our household. All the kids from the neighborhood played in my house every day. I'd feed them 3 meals a day. And then I remember one day I was taking her to preschool because she was having a little problem with the speech delay. That she didn't know her words, the way they wanted to. She'll learn how to talk soon enough. Don't worry about that. But I was such a doting father, that whenever all she had to do was point, So, okay, what do you want, Vic? I'll get it for you. So she didn't really have to learn to talk that much. She didn't need that much verbal skills, Usually little kids with really great verbal skills, it's because they're being neglected and they need to speak up for themselves. So she didn't ever have that problem. And I remember when I first started taking it to preschool. One day we're driving over there. And I says, Vic, when you're gone during the day, I really miss you. It's lonely, it's sad without you. And she goes, Dad, don't be sad. Because before you know it, 3 o'clock comes around. And then here comes the love again. And it's so true. Me and my daughter were always so close when she was little. Always a good kid. Never gave me a day's trouble in her whole life. And I suppose it was about 8 years ago, when she was about 9 or 10 years old. I saw this cartoon of Christopher Robin walking along with Winnie the Pooh. Right? This is what you come to the Opperman report for, right? Winnie the Pooh stories. Right? I know a lot of you guys out there. I know a lot of listeners, you're real intense and everything's got to be, uncovering this and exposing that and investigating this. But I got to tell you, the number one thing that people contact me about, is how's Victoria doing? How's the Daniel fast going, Ed? These are the things, there are listeners who care about these things in my life. And this is what I'm living through this week. And this is what's on my mind. And this is what I'm going to tell you tonight. And I found this cartoon that said, promise you'll never forget me, Pooh. And this was Christopher Robin talking to Winnie the Pooh. And they're walking down there holding the street. And Winnie the Pooh says, I promise, don't worry, never. And when I saw that, it really affected me. Because obviously, it's not Christopher Robin's. No, it's not Winnie the Pooh who's going to forget Christopher Robin. Christopher Robin's a little boy, and he has a great relationship with his little teddy bear, his little stuffed toy, and his imaginary life in the 100-acre woods. And he's the one that's going to forget Winnie the Pooh. He's going to grow up and forget. Because he's going to grow up and move on. But this brilliant cartoon has Christopher Robin saying, promise you'll never forget me, Pooh. And when I saw it, it affected me so much. Because I knew one day my little girl would grow up and move on. And, the thought terrified me. That day would come someday. And I remember showing her the cartoon too, and I said, explaining it to her. Hey. But I always knew that the day would come. And I was never one of those dads, too, that's, I got my shotgun, I'm going to keep my daughter away from the boys and stuff like that. I always wanted my kids to have a happy, healthy life and grow and go on. I know you only have your kid for a short time. And you're parenting for their future. And you can't be selfish. And you can't be self-indulgent. Because especially somebody like me with my personality. I put myself in this position in life, where people come to me with their problems, and I'm like the father figure in their life. And, I enjoy teaching, I enjoy, sharing knowledge and experience in my life, over the air to people. And so you can imagine how, intense that would be for Victoria, my daughter, who I love more than anything. To have that kind of focus and attention on her, it must be overwhelming for her. And this was a very hard week for her. Just leaving the house, for the last time. And we're so close. She helps me with the show and my work, and we're always laughing and hanging out together. We're best friends in so many ways. And I'm looking back at this, and I don't even want to get into this on the air, but I think I made some mistakes with that, and I should have allowed her more independence. So we get over to this American University. Right when we get off the plane there in Washington, D.C., and we run into Wolf Blitzer from CNN right there in the airport. And like I said, there's these embassies right around the corner. You see all these brilliant kids. And by the way, a lot of those kids don't even want to be there. And I talked to their parents. I don't think there's another kid there that actually put in the effort themselves that Victoria did to get the financial aid and to get all the preparing all the stuff like that to get in there that she did. A lot of these kids are just, rude to their parents. They're grunting. They're stumbling around. They're, looking for the parties. And I got this gem of a freaking kid, man. But, she's off. She's on her own now. There's no one there. Except strangers, There's a building and a facility, dorm, RAs and stuff like that, other kids. And she has one friend there that from her school that went to George Washington University. She has a friend there in town. But she's all alone. Just like, when I got off the plane tonight and drove home, I'm all alone. And I'm used to having this support too, this helper around the house and in my life and with my work. You take this little kid, and not just her, but her friends too. I taught them all to tie their shoes for the first time. I taught them to ride their bikes. To learn how to read and write and spell. All these kids I taught them, and I loved it. I ended up becoming like a preschool teacher. We used to do this thing called the word ladder, where you write down the 3-letter words on a piece of paper. Each one you write down on a different piece of paper, and you stack them up one after another, like a little path, And before they could come into the house to play, they would have to read each word. Otherwise, they'd have to stop and go back and start over again. And again, to leave before they could leave, they'd have the words right there at the entrance of the front door. The word ladder, we used to call it. But you got to realize there's a time to let go. Right? Everybody knows that. Now, I got to tell you something. When I was a kid, I'm talking a little kid, the word ladder age, 4 years old, 5 years old, 3 years old. My grandmother, I had this little Irish grandmother. She was about 4'8" or 4'9". She weighed probably about 95 pounds if she weighed, or even less than that. And she lived in Manhattan on 86th Street. And my German grandfather was a doorman. He used to work in apartment buildings working as a doorman. I think he was like an alcoholic too. And my grandmother used to work as a nanny for these rich families. And I remember at her funeral, at my grandmother's funeral, this young man came up to me and he says, your grandmother was my nanny. And I was always jealous of you because she was your real nanny and she was just my hired nanny. She was just... And he says, do you remember when we met? And I did remember when we met. When we had met, we were both about 4 or 5 years old. And by the way, his name was Christopher Robbins. Okay. All right. How do you like that? Okay. And I was visiting my grandparents in Manhattan. And my grandmother took me to her work to play with the little boy who she babysat for. And I remember he was like a little... I can remember this. Because you know me, I remember every insult, every slight, every bit of disrespect from when I was 3 years old. Just, I guess you'd call that a character flaw. But I can remember playing in Manhattan in one of those Manhattan parks. I guess it was a sandbox or something like that. And me and this little boy, we had a little dispute. And I probably smacked him with a shovel or something like that. And because he was the son of my grandmother's employer, she had to cater to him over me. Because this was a child of wealth and privilege, where I was not. And you want to know what? I remembered that. I didn't know, I did kind of know, hey, my grandmother has to take his side over mine because she works for them as their servant. And I guess that stuck in my craw, because I remember when he came to me at the funeral and he tried to approach me as an adult. I was having none of it. I shook his hand, of course, but I had no respect for this man. And I can remember as an adult, having clawed my way up to wealth at a very young age. I was a property owner at 19 years old. I was a landlord at 21. Owned a nightclub in Manhattan, owned a horse and carriage around Manhattan, invested in some serious businesses with my family and stuff like that, and had cash out the wazoo. Had 100 people working for me out there in the street, an army of marijuana peddlers and bill collectors and all types. And I had bought my way into high society, I guess you call it, right? Hanging out in Manhattan, all the fancy places, Waldorf Astoria, all that kind of stuff. And I can remember one day being down at Canyon Ranch in Tucson, Arizona, which is a real fancy place. It's a health spa down there. It costs a fortune. I ran into Keith Hernandez. I told you the story one time. But because I was there by myself, the first time I went there to check in, I thought it was just a regular hotel. I had no idea it was a health spa, and they wanted to take my blood pressure. I'm saying, what the hell's going on? And my sister told me about it. She says, oh, you go to Arizona, you should go to Canyon Ranch Health Spa. So I, went there and thought I'd check in. I didn't even make a reservation or anything. I just showed up just to check in. And he says, okay, we'll take you. They started taking my blood pressure. I want to take it. I said, well, But anyway, asked me if I was depressed and all this kind of stuff like that. I wish I was. And because I was there by myself, when they feed you 3 meals a day, because there's no sugar, no coffee, no alcohol, and they have this great stuff there, exercise programs, Tai Chi and yoga and things like that, and weightlifting. And during the dinner, they sit you down, if you go there by yourself, at a captain's table. And that's where they put all the single people. You sit around at a captain's table with a bunch of strangers and eat your dinner. But I was a charming guy. I can hold a conversation. I had a quick wit. And people liked me. I was a fun guy. People respected me. And one day I'm holding court here at the captain's table there at Canyon Ranch, Tucson. And by the way, there are people like, Oprah Winfrey go there, and I saw Ricardo Montalban there, and Barbara Streisand used to go there. But there's no celebrities at my table, but I'm sitting there and I'm kind of chatting things up. And there was this young woman there, not that young, she was older than me, but she was an attractive woman, wealthy woman. And I had her attention. I don't know if I ever told this story before in here, but it's something that's stuck in my mind for a long time. And some guy comes in and sits at the table. And not much of a personality. I was better looking. I probably had more money. But he starts talking about how he was a Ivy League. I forget what college he mentioned. He's talking about his Ivy League college education. He went to this school. And suddenly everyone at the table's attention turned away from me and toward him. What could I do? Make up a great school. I went to a college of Staten Island. Okay? I went to a community college. Okay, at night. And little classes, on the weekends or the day. I never had a dorm. I never had a fraternity. I never did any of that kind of stuff. And I regretted it, in my life. I was a smart kid. I was never so jealous of anyone in my life. That this guy of privilege and education could just come and snatch up all my glory that I worked so hard for. Because I worked hard to get where I was. I risked prison to get where I risked death to get where I was at that table. And this guy could take it away with his privilege and his wealth. Well, my kid worked hard to get to this school. And I guess it was it yesterday or the day before? Because coming back was like another 2-day trip. I've been up all night long. Yesterday morning. It was yesterday morning. Was it yesterday morning? Could be the day before. I got up like 5 a.m. and we went to an all-day long orientation. We had to travel, walk around the school and meet all the professors and the state, department heads and stuff like that. And then I said goodbye to Vic, which was a very uncomfortable goodbye because she was just breaking down so much that she just wanted to end and just kind of get me out of there. Because she was having these real breakdowns. Like almost panic attack type breakdowns. Kid's been through a hell of a lot of stress, man, this past year. Some stuff I haven't told you about, but you know some of the stuff with her mother and stealing the college fund and now this big move and the transition and all this. But there were some other things too, some other trauma that she suffered this year that I haven't told you about. So I left and I went back to the little motel room by myself for the last time. She had forgotten a bunch of stuff at the hotel, so I brought it to her and said goodbye, and that was it, I stayed up all night. Couldn't sleep last night at all. So I got up this morning about 3 a.m. and I head over to the airport to get down there. And standby flights all day long today, which I can tell you some stories about that too. But here I am now. Now, during these orientations yesterday, one of her professors, who was an impressive guy. Now, by the way, I'm impressed by these kids down there, man, but none of them, Vic holds her weight with these kids. There's no doubt in my mind. She's way more savvy than these kids. And she's way more naturally smart. Some of them came from good schools. Don't get me wrong. And there's a lot of athletes here, too. Got a free ride to college. But there's no doubt in my mind that she's going to thrive in this place. Academically. So one of her professors says, he says, when you went to high school, you absorbed knowledge and then you churned it out. You learned facts, figures, numbers, and then you recited it back. You memorized things. And he says, what you're going to do here at American University is you're going to create knowledge. He says, you're going to tell me what you're passionate about, and you're going to write it up in 250 words. And I'm going to take that, and I'm going to take that to different professors, and I'm going to make you a research assistant for this professor. And you're going to go, let's say it's immigration policy, that you're upset about these kids being held in cages. And you're going to work for him, and you're going to put together a paper, and that paper is going to be published, and then that paper is going to be taken to Senate. By the way, too, like the RAs and stuff, all the kids, they're all interning with Capitol. Kids going to work in Capitol Hill next year. He's graduating in April, going to work at Capitol Hill. Already interned for people on Capitol Hill. 95% of that place has great internships. I've talked to all these kids. Fascinating stuff. They go to parties at these embassies for the free food. He says, you're gonna do this research paper, and then we're gonna take it, and we're gonna take it to places, and we're gonna create policy with this. We're gonna take it to senators and congressmen and House that we know, and they're going to use it to create policy. You're creating knowledge. That's what you're going to be doing here. And I heard this, man. I says, whoa. You know, we sit around, we talk about how we want to expose things. We want to get, tell people about what the problems are. Talk about these kids in these cages and things like this. But here you have an opportunity. You have access to the seats of power to go in there and change policy. And that's what we're going to be doing. You look at what I'm doing here, and I'm talking to the Sun, I'm talking to NPR, I'm talking to Daily Mail, Business Insider, and I'm influencing this stuff, man. You got all these YouTubers out there and all these hot shots, these big shots, man, regurgitating the same stuff, coming up with wild theories, stuff they've seen on. But here we are, man. We're actually influencing the stories with facts, with reality, with the truth, with insider knowledge. And now, here I got my kid at the seat of power going out there creating policy, creating change, working to have influence, with the people who can make these decisions. So, do I feel sad tonight? Yeah. Am I exhausted tonight, man? Yeah, but we're getting stuff done, man. And now, I got this kid out there in the world who's going to get done 100 times more than I ever have in my life. So, we are a family, and I hope you realize that when you support this family, this is what you're supporting, and this is what you're advancing, and this is what we're all here doing together. We're not just talking, we're not just stroking our own egos, we're not just making stuff up. We're taking names, we're kicking ass, and we're getting stuff done. So, I think that's everything I wanted to cover tonight. A lot of these shows I played during the week now, I played a lot of repeats and stuff, stories that I like to hear myself, that I love to tell, I've told over the years. But a lot of these stories are specifically for my daughter. Because she doesn't listen to the show. She has me around all the time. And a lot of these stories I tell because these are stories I used to tell her when she was a little kid. And I know that someday I'll be gone. And these stories will live in posterity, and she can listen to them when she wants to hear her dad's voice when I'm gone. And I wanted to write her a letter this week. But there just wasn't enough time, and I didn't know what words to say. But I do want to make it clear that if my daughter ever does listen to this show, and she probably will, because this would be a title she would recognize. I've never been more proud of anybody in my whole life. And never been more loved by anybody in my whole life than I have by my beautiful daughter. And so I just want to thank you so much.